Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Upstream OLM Working Group meeting. Today is October 24th, and we have a relatively light agenda for the week. So first, going over the RFCs and briefs that we have currently under review. The first one is the RBAC management RFC that has its consensus date tomorrow. And we have Chris asking if it's okay for an extension to the end of the week. We have had some engagement feedback on the RFC relatively recently. So does anyone want to speak more about this?
Todd, I don't know if you have any opinions, if you feel like you've gotten lots of feedback yet. I don't think I've given any either. I also don't think we're in a huge rush.
Yeah, so my understanding, I've not received any feedback from you yet, Joe. I've received some from Andy and a few others. Yeah, my understanding is we're not in a big rush. We're not necessarily going to implement this for 4/15 time period or for the current release. So
Todd, do you have any concerns about moving it back 2 days?
you mean adding 2 days to the due date?
Yeah.
No.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. This is Chris. The reason why I'm asking is I'm finally getting the OLM V1 specs are finally getting interesting to me because originally they were pretty low level and they didn't really apply. There's a lot of background to get ready for this point. So I think now I'm going to be socializing it more broadly with our rest of our teams. And so none of them have been watching this at all. And so for some reason I missed this one. Yeah, I'd like to get some more eyeballs on this one. It's really interesting.
It's pretty low key right now just because I think the priority on it has dropped. So in fact, I just updated the due date and I'll post in the OLM dev channel that the due date has been updated.
Todd, you mean priority for this current release, right? Which is like the next 3 weeks for our team.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right, yeah. I think we're looking to push this out. There's other priorities.
But just to be clear, we're still planning to do it eventually.
Yes. The priorities are a ordered list, not a not a yes or no.
Yes.
So
That's awesome. And we also have the draft application RFC for V1, I believe. So Jordan, would you like to speak to that?
I don't think Jordan's here today.
Oh, my mistake.
I can just briefly mention it again. We've brought this up the last couple of meetings, but if anybody isn't aware, this is essentially updates to FBC that would make it possible to declare that various things are deprecated, which we intend to then go and teach OLM about so that OLM can tell users that they're subscribed to deprecated stuff or that they're on a deprecated version or that the package they're using is deprecated. So all sorts of deprecation stuff. So if you're interested in that, we'd appreciate feedback there too.
right, I believe that is one of the things that was prioritized over the RBAC management. As an example.
Yep.
Just a general question on RFCs versus briefs versus PRs. These RFCs, are they designed to be pretty accurate or are they still kind of loose, like a loose concept? The only reason I'm asking is because, for example, there's some specifications in there. I wanted to kind of figure out how picky I need to get about those specifications.
In general, like briefs are probably the highest level thing that talk about concepts that we want to make sure exist, but not necessarily implementation details. And then you'll generally see RFCs that say, well, here's the brief that I'm going to talk about, and now I'm going to get more specific. To answer your question, if you've got suggestions or comments about implementation details or design, put them in. Like, I think the RFC is the place for that if we're going to capture them. There have been cases where we say like, oh, like we don't really know, like we'll all agree that we can figure that out when we get to the actual PR. But if we know of something that we want to put in there, then we'd rather put it in there than not. Ideally, the RFC is everyone agrees on it and it's specified to the point that it's fairly simple to go and implement, but that's not always easy to do.
And then what's typically the next step after the RFC?
So we would get the consensus, and then essentially at that point, it's up for the community to go and implement, as long as it achieved the consensus. Whether it's implemented immediately after the consensus or not just depends on who in the community is willing to work on it.
So basically just look at the board to try to see if there's a tie-in to this. Is there other, I guess, are there breadcrumbs that kind of cross-link everything? I see there's ones from RFCs to briefs. Will there also be RFCs to the forward PR or issue or? Okay.
Yeah, the way that we've been trying to do that, and I'm not sure we've done an amazing job, but in general, I think we've done a decent job. We'll go and create, you'll see like Epic GitHub issues that have like the label Epic on them, I think. And those are generally one-to-one with an RFC, and then we'll go down and break that into individual stories. I don't know that we will always go and immediately define an RFC and an Epic issue as soon as the RFC is approved, right? So like for Todd's RFC, that may not actually get an Epic issue until, someone goes and decides that they're interested in working on it. So we've got refinement meetings that I think I don't know if I think we should have them open if they're not, but that's where we would start talking about doing that, is in a refinement meeting.
Yeah, I guess there are two instances I'm thinking about. So in comments to previous RFCs, I've seen comments saying, yeah, we discarded that, we talked about that, and so I kind of felt like, oh, maybe I should have been in the loop for this, or maybe it should have been documented in the RFC, or that's out of scope of this RFC. So where is that in scope? Those kind of conversations must be happening someplace. And that's fine, I'm not in them. I just, seems like I'm missing something in those contexts.
My suggestion would be, if you feel like you're missing something, then speak up. And,
yep, okay.
And it should be linked, and we should have the information in the open.
Okay, I will continue asking dumb questions then. Then go ahead.
I was going to say is, so, sometimes some of the conversation, a lot of the, like, at least on the RFCs I've been involved with, the conversations occurred mostly within the documents, and sometimes the comments have been closed. So always look at the closed comments, the resolved comments.
Yeah, I missed that too. I didn't realize that, because it looked like things disappeared, and so they didn't really disappear. They're just hidden.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that's a nuance that a lot of people might not get. I'm not a Google Docs guy myself, so I'm not super familiar with that. I'm just getting familiar with it now. So,
and for those kind of things, Todd, what we might want to try to do is, if there's something substantive that comes out of a comment,
right, have a section at the end that discusses a salient points. Yeah,
right, yeah, or somehow work in one way or another.
Yeah, so what's going to happen is, for at least from my company, I am kind of getting involved in this, and I'm going to start pointing and shooting people at specific RFCs who don't know anything about briefs and RFCs. So then they're going to come in and they're going to want to see the context of the whole thing and at least get breadcrumbs so they can dive in and ask, legible questions. So I need to kind of train them on how to properly review the RFC, right? And how to communicate, because they're going to feel probably a little bit intimidated, making sure they're not, asking silly questions that shouldn't be asked and so forth.
So Chris, another thing you could do is you could go look at the templates in the Google Drive for briefs and RFCs, which I think should be in both places. There's a lot, and actually Gavin may have told me that you can't actually see all of this, but in general, the idea is that you'll be able to see kind of the intention of those based on looking at the templates, because the templates, you know, you would like, there's a little placeholder text for each thing that says like, here's what this section is for, and here's what the intent is here. So if you don't see that, then also let us know, because I think we want to be able to make it possible for everyone to understand what the process is, and for everyone to even be able to contribute their own briefs and RFCs. So we want that whole thing to be open such that it's easily consumable and understandable.
Yep, understood. And then the second thing, for example, is in the Jordan's deprecation delegation identification one. Looks like he's started a PR for a POC for the implementation behind this, at least for the schema, but it's not linked to it. So it's just kind of, maybe that's his own just playground where he's just starting to get ahead of the game and solidifying these concepts. I'm not sure if he wants feedback on those PRs or what. So it just wasn't real clear. Again, that's probably a Jordan question, but because there's some details inside the RFC that are like, for example, the queue format isn't valid. So I wasn't sure if that was just, well, he did respond. So he did respond, it's supposed to be valid. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out how picky I need to be on some of these things.
I would say the pickier the better. And we can always say like, that's out of scope, or yeah, no big deal, or whatever. But be as picky and ask as many questions, and tell everyone else to do the same thing.
Okay, I'll tell people not to be shy. Perfect.
Yep.
I think it might also be, we might still be able to have conversations about specific, like really low-level implementation details once the issues are created. We could probably also like just spin out small spikes if needed after an RFC is accepted, as long as the overall idea is clear.
Yeah, you'll see us every now and then put proof of concepts together. A lot of times those help define pieces of the RFC that aren't clear. So that's probably why you're seeing Jordan's PR show up right now.
All right, moving on. We have the operator controller 0.7 release that Daniel made yesterday. So thanks for that, Daniel. I'm not sure if we want to speak further to that.
Yeah, I could just mention really briefly what went into that. I mean, I'm sure probably a lot of you have seen that information already. I posted it in the Slack channel as well as the Google group. But if you haven't seen it yet, I think the main features that went in there were Semver upgrade support, as well as the bundle deployment health stuff from bumping up the RucPack version. The next release will likely include a version bump for Catalog D, which I know has some features coming through. And yeah, that's basically it. I'm happy to post some links here too if people want them, just so you can see a nice list of completed milestones. But otherwise, yeah, that information is in the OLM Dev Slack channel or on the Google group.
Yeah, I think having some links here would be pretty useful too. But yeah. And Joe, you have a new item for a demo next week on.
Yeah, so I think in the upstream in the OLM dev channel yesterday, I was asking about demos, and we couldn't quite get things put together since I asked late yesterday. But I think next week we've got a lot of stuff that has sort of come together in the last week or so. So I think we should try to plan doing sort of another end-to-end demo. The interesting new items that we have. So we now have some stuff in Catalog D that supports polling, which is basically getting it to equivalence with OLM v0's catalog source. So we can set the thing up to, pull once an hour to pull down new catalogs that show up under a tag, for example. That's not something we could do before. On the operator controller side, we have new stuff coming in, and I think maybe a few more little things that Nikolai's still working on, which I think are somewhat unimportant, but Nikolai, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but we've got the code in now that handles Semver upgrades, so you don't have to specify upgrade edges necessarily. You just have to say this version is in this channel. And that's controlled based on a feature gate. And then we've also got stuff in Ruckpack that will report the health of an object or of an installation, not just whether it was applied successfully or not. So that's all not totally finished yet. Like, for example, we want to have the health bubbled up into the operator, which hasn't been done yet. But I think we've made like enough progress over the last month or so that we could put together a pretty cool demo. So I'm that's why I put aspirational here, because I don't think I can do this all on my own, but I want to rally around getting something like that put together for next week. And I want to announce it now so that if anybody's interested, they can show up and watch it, or at least catch the recording of it.
Yeah, that's definitely worth making an action item out of.
Hey, Ankita, I don't know if you know this already, but I don't think you're sharing your screen.
Oh, I'm not.
At least I can't.
Yeah, it's a nice big black screen right now.
Would there be any interest in doing just like a a doc of the demos beforehand? I know usually that sort of comes after the fact, but if I actually I would have the cycles to maybe contribute some short procedures that would be like a text representation of the video demos. If folks want to reach out as a making the demos.
I would be interested. Maybe like this first step is like, let's just go write down the procedure for what the demo will be, and then we can go and run through the procedure.
Yep, sounds great. I'd be happy to even test things beforehand if you get a team enough time to run through it, and then I can also clean up the doc.
Okay. Maybe we can touch base. Anybody who's interested, reach out on Upstream Slack, and we can all sort of rally around doing all the things to make this really nice. I'll start a thread in the OLM dev channel.
Sounds good.
Okay. So next we have the milestone check-ins for each of our projects. For catalog day, we had a release sometime last week, and I think the only thing that we have left is just to finish up the serving epic that Joe mentioned earlier. So it's in a really good state as far as I can tell, but would anyone like to speak to this?
Yeah, so I think, like Joe already mentioned, we've released v0.8.0, which has the direct registry unpack client and the polling, and these were our highest priority items that we want to get done. At the moment for v0.9.0, we've kept it empty just to see what comes out of solidifying those efforts. The only thing that you can see out there is that epic is only open because of the story right on top of it, which is just a documentation, which is what we are learning towards, that can allow you to access the endpoints. But I think Bryce already has a PR for that, which is a CLI that can help you do that, some of that too. So it's just, again, solidifying everything that we've done, which is HTTP servers, direct registry unpack clients, and polling. But yeah, this release will be focused instead of on more new heavy-ended features, it'll be more on solidifying anything that's remaining for those features that we've already delivered.
Right. So if that's everything, moving on. The operator controller milestone is also pretty light, considering that the new version was just cut yesterday. So this might be just the last bit of work that we need for the summer version ranges support. Would anyone like to speak to this?
Todd and I talked about this one somewhat recently, and we were trying to figure out where to put it. Like right now, the operator controller repo has a bunch of sort of, the high level procedures, concepts, sorts of beginnings of docs. So I pointed Todd over to Anik and Michael's brief for RFC about OLM v1 docs, but we never really pulled that thread any further. So I guess maybe now's a good time to ask, like, where should we put documents about a specific, sort of more reference docs that are about this field, how it works, what the semantics are, that kind of stuff.
So Joe.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you finished your thought. Please finish your thought.
The only last thing I was going to say is one place obviously to put them would be in the Go doc, which will end up in the CRD description. But I get the impression we also want to put this in a place where they'll end up, on a web page as well. So I think Todd and I were kind of stuck on like, well, I don't really know where to put this. The doc stuff is still kind of a work in progress, but it would be good to get some answers on that so that we don't just block all documentation that we would like to add.
Right, and this falls onto all the other documentation that may exist for OLM v1, because right now there's a little bit of kind of like getting started, but it doesn't really describe everything within the operator controller repo. So I think we definitely want a home, a good home for the docs.
So about the statement that Joe made about the brief that came out and then we didn't pull any thread on that. That's, I think, been mostly because of prioritization. I think we've not had enough resources to also concentrate on the docs. What Michael and I actually caught up yesterday, and we talked about this exact thing, and the fact that we still need a little bit of infrastructure, for example, on the catalog D side, to get things bootstrapped. But the operator controller website has bootstrap. So I wanted to also ask these questions as a check-in, because I think that website was bootstrapped like 3 months ago. Has that website being updated with every latest feature that's been coming in? Because I think Michael from the docs team was also interested in knowing if, when they are writing down documentation for downstream, for example, can they rely on the upstream documentation as a source of truth, sort of for the latest ongoing. Do we know if the operator controller website is not being updated then? If this,
I think the answer to that is no, but I think part of the reason why is because if I remember correctly, and you guys can again correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, we essentially said there's sort of two personas for docs, right? There's like the engineer putting up a PR for code. And the doc that we would want them to write is like, here's the reference doc for this, for this code essentially. And we would always be able to, pretty easily and pretty lightweight and not have too much structure around, the voice and the tense and all the style stuff associated with these things. They're very technical, just put them in with your PRs. Those don't necessarily go onto the doc site. And then separately, there's another persona who's like, okay, I'm curating the doc site and I'm going to go and look at all of the docs that exist that all of the developers have added, and I'll be able to write with a consistent style and with a consistent voice and yada, yada, yada. And that will be what goes on the doc site. So I think for this issue, I guess what we are missing right now in the operator controller repo and really in all the repos is like, where do we ask developers to put reference docs that just like we just dump into a place such that then they can be bubbled up into the higher level docs?
So I think Michael had a great idea, which is if you're talking about these rough sketches, like you said, Joe, that we're not worrying about the tense and the procedures and grammar and all of that stuff. This kind of issue that you created, for example, the catalog D stuff. My plan, I'm going on vacation next week, so my plan is to just bootstrap the website. But if I don't get to that, I think Michael just said create some issues where all of us can just crowdsource ideas about what we want to see in the doc site and just dump it into like comments, and then maybe Michael or someone who has the time from the community can then go and curate those or crowd consume those comments and then curate the doc site the way we want it to be. So
yeah, but like I'm sort of ignoring the doc site, to be totally honest right now. Like I'm thinking like Todd has a PR up, or he did, it's closed now, it's merged. But like I just want to get something into the repo for this spec.version version field. Where do I put it? I don't care about like I'm gonna say something. Todd maybe doesn't care about the doc site for this particular aspect of it. Like we're just asking Todd, like, hey, can we make sure that we have some docs that explain sort of how this works? Don't worry about all of the doc site stuff. Just get some text somewhere such that it now exists and we can keep moving.
right. So do you know about the docs folder in the operator controller repo?
Yeah, so I did look at that, and that seemed to be very much kind of like a here's how to get started and less of a reference. And I think what we need here is reference, and we are missing references on, for example, version and channel and even, I mean, name is simple, but we're missing, and package name, for example, we're missing a reference for all of that.
I mean, that what you see over there as in get started is because that was how the website was bootstrapped and it was never updated. That folder is there specifically so that we can go ahead and dump all of our docs in there.
So I think one of the things that I'm missing is, do we and I have an opinion, so I'll ask a question, then I'll state my opinion. Do we expect all of the like quote unquote random non-well-formed developer docs to like immediately go onto the website? Or do we expect, let's dump some markdown somewhere in the repo that yes, you'll see in GitHub, but then the doc site is the curated thing? In my opinion is that's what we should do. Like I think we should have something
later,
not the doc site, that we can just dump markdown for all of the reference stuff. And then Michael or some designated people who are going to be caring for and curating the doc site will then pull from those places.
Okay, I mean, that's easy to do, right? We can just create another folder that says docs staging and then dump everything in there.
I second the idea of having at least references for our spec. I mean, like the API in general as Godoc, so at least we know what each new introduced field is at a high level, at least when we're just like eyeballing the code itself. But yeah, for more detailed docs, we especially around like implementation details and all that, that we want to call out. The staging idea might be a better place for it to go.
So Michael has his hand up. I'll let him go, and I think we should try to wrap this conversation up.
Yeah, I think having a reference folder to start would be good. But I do think that if we can sort of also think to an eye towards like if you have a help string, or you're going to have help commands or kind of printing errors to kind of know that find a resource you could tag, just then to just even in the PR on the line, like, oh, here's an error string. You want to take a look at it and see how this reads. I mean, I think that can be an eventual thing. I know we're not there yet. First, we need to catch up on these reference docs and kind of creating something cohesive. But if we can sort of keep in mind a potential for the future in this other way, and that at least my perspective as a writer, the hard part is research and getting procedures and figuring out what to write. So if the skeleton of the procedure is there and the skeleton of those things are there, I can generally iterate pretty quickly. So, but I'd rather show that by doing than to just, overwhelm myself. But I just wanted to put that on.
Yeah, I think not everything can be doc or included in the help string, but yes, we should definitely use help strings whenever it is relevant. What I think is being highlighted right now is we don't need to overthink this. We can just have a doc staging folder, start dumping in there. The one thing that is getting highlighted is that we are not writing enough docs. We've delivered a lot of features, but we haven't written enough docs, and it's slowly creeping up to us, and it's going to create some blockers if we don't start acting on it right now. So the easiest thing, let's just create a doc, staging, start dumping docs in there, including this one, documentation for support of some version ranges.
That sounds good to me, Anik. Do you mind, I don't know who has cycles, but I know, Anik, you've been participating in the doc stuff. Do you mind taking an action to go and create or like, I think we need these folders in various repos. Do you mind trying to figure out how to do that and then communicating with folks like, hey, this exists now, like, let's start dumping stuff here.
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
All right, awesome, thank you.
I'm going to update this just to indicate that basically to indicate that decision is we'll add this type of information into the operator controller repo within staging our reference directory. To at least, note the decision.
Sounds good to me.
All right, moving on. We have the DEPI's 0.2 milestone, which yeah, it has just these two are related issues if I'm not mistaken. But Mikolai or Joe or anyone, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, I can explain what's going on here quickly. So I just created today an issue for, yes, this one. So it spun out after the other issue about non-deterministic error message. So the request is to use semicolon to separate different pieces of the error messages, and I gave an example how it would look like. So this one should be really good and good first issue. So if anyone would like to look into doing this, feel free to do that. I will make sure to quickly review this. And the second one, so we addressed the underlying issue about the non-deterministic issue error. I think we addressed the underlying issue on the operator controller side, but I kept this one open to make sure that DEPI's output in the error is based on the input into the resolution into resolver. So we can say, hey, this is going to be deterministic on the DEPI side. And if I think it is already, but we need to make sure that this is the case and probably add some test cases if we don't have already. And I haven't had a time to look into that just yet. So that's basically what's going on here.
I've raised my hand because I have a question. I wonder on the I'll put this in the issue too, but just because we're talking about it in the semicolon one, I wonder if we should try new lines or one of the other sort of tree-based formats that me, you, and Pear were talking about. So I think that would make it even better than this. The only concern I have is whether there are certain types of, kubectl output that would make that, confusing, because it might have /n everywhere rather than actual new lines in the output. But at least something to consider if we haven't already.
Yeah, I think there will be no slashes, but I think the message might look broken. But I think for now, I would probably go with the semicolon for now. But I think we should create another issue to look into better formatting error messages in general, because I think error message today contains a lot of information about the problem itself, and it is not clear what caused the error in general, like what is the conflict here. And I would like ideally to be able to output to the users only the important bits, like similar to pip install from Python, where if there is like a conflicting version, it only gives you the important bits, like, hey, this package requires package foo from version 1 to 2, but the other package requires package foo from with version more than 3 or something like that, and like omit all the stuff. I would still like this context, like greater context, to be available for troubleshooting and debugging, but the error output should be more like simplified. And I think it will be a much bigger effort to do that. So for now, yeah, maybe semicolon or like new space and new lines maybe will be fine as well. But just want to define this as a small scope for now. But yeah, please do comment on the issue with any alternative suggestions if you have.
Yep, will do. Thanks.
Okay. If no one else has anything to speak to that, we're done with our agenda. So if does anyone have any topics to bring up for discussion that are not mentioned? Well, I'll take that as a no. So for the last to-do list item on our agenda, would anyone like to host the meeting for next week?
I can try.
Okay, thank you, Nicola. Yeah, I think that is it for our working group meeting for the week. Thank you for joining, everyone.
Thanks, Dunky.
Thank you.